Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy. This is episode number 84, Sexy Math.
Sexy Math? That's a great title.
I know. I love this title because I am not very good at math. But this math I can totally understand.
I know you know sexy math.
I do know sexy math.
That's great.
So today I thought it would be a good idea to go through something kind of fun.
Okay.
And this is something that I do with most of my clients just for perspective. And a lot of thoughts come up as we do this quick exercise. And let's be honest, they're not good thoughts for the wife usually. So I want to talk about this exercise in reality and give you an example.
So wait, does this only apply to wives or to husbands too?
Husbands too.
Because a lot of our thoughts aren't good either.
I know.
So it's not just the wife, right?
No, it's not.
We're all in this together.
That's right. We are.
Okay.
So sexy math. So what I want to do is just kind of walk through practical numbers of how often a husband thinks about sex.
I'm out of here. Seriously.
Compared to the wife, right?
Okay.
And so I'm going to take a real life example from a client I had several years ago. And so we can see the difference. And that way we can have some relief, I'm hoping, for the women that, hey, these numbers are different and it's not a surprise. But sometimes when we look at how different they are, it can really give us some perspective. So I usually ask my clients to ask their husband this question: how often they think about sex. And I want
think
them,
they're going to be honest about that?
I ask them to be.
I hope they are. They should be.
I don't know if it's always the honest answer, but at least we've got maybe a close answer.
Okay.
So we're going to go through the husband's numbers first. So
Wait, is this like an average or is this a particular person?
this is just this couple, but this is very typical. These numbers are very typical
Okay.
of the couples that come to me or the women that come to me. This is kind of very typical numbers.
Now, if somebody doesn't relate to these numbers,
That's okay.
that's okay,
Yeah.
right? It's a matter of just being aware.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so my client had to ask her husband how many times he thinks about sex, right? And so they started on the hourly basis. How many minutes are you thinking about sex?
Out of an hour.
Yes.
Okay.
So her husband said every 5 minutes. So that relates to 12 times per hour. So just think about that concept for a second. A husband's at work. In 1 hour at work, he's probably thought about sex 12 times, at least for this couple.
And a lot of those thoughts, let me just speak for the man here. A lot of those thoughts might just be fleeting thoughts that go through the mind and may not be wicked or evil, even if they're not thoughts about their wife, right? Because thoughts come.
Yes, they do.
It depends on what you do with them. But those thoughts, because of the way that we're generally built, those thoughts might come because we see something, she's wearing a short skirt.
Yes.
And things like just flee through our mind. And so I think that's a reality that is, in some ways, you've talked about on this podcast, how as you learned that about me and I was honest about those thoughts, you actually had a little bit more compassion for me.
Yes.
Now, we're accountable for what we do with those thoughts. So that's probably something else that we all have accountability toward that, and we have agency with what we do with those thoughts. But it's an interesting number. Okay, keep going.
Okay. So 12 times per hour is what we're at right now. Now, let's go on for that day. So if it's 12 times per hour, then for the day, and we're going to assume there's sleep time and we're not going to count dreaming and all that stuff. But we're going to assume that a person is sleeping 8 hours, maybe. And with that assumption, it's 192 times per day.
That there's a thought.
Yes.
Now, that could be more some days and less other days.
And maybe these thoughts last longer.
Yeah, and depending what we do with those thoughts, I mean, we could have hours of straight thinking about it.
Totally.
Right? We get lost in our thoughts. We start to daydream, fantasize. Okay? Hopefully those are within the realms of what's appropriate for a marriage.
Yes.
Sometimes they may not be, but hopefully we're working on completely focusing on all of our sexual energy on our wife.
Yes.
But that does take work.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay, so just think about this. For this couple, this husband is thinking about sex 192 times per day. So now let's spread that out for a week, right? That comes out to 1,344 times per week. That's a lot.
And a lot of those thoughts actually you may not even notice that you're having them too. Like you have them, but they come and go. I don't know. I don't know how to like really reconcile that number.
Again, this is for this couple. It doesn't have to be that everyone fits this.
Okay.
But this couple, like this is their awareness.
And in some ways, I'm trying to talk through people as they listen to this too.
Yes.
Okay, so let's keep going.
So if they're at 1,344 times per week, let's extend that out for the month.
And this is the man.
This is the husband.
Okay.
5,376 times per month they're thinking about sex.
Okay.
Okay, now here's where the math gets big. We're gonna multiply this month number for the whole year.
Okay.
All right, you guys ready for this big number?
I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I have an idea of what it will be.
It is 64,512 times per year. 64,000. That's in 1 year.
And those are separate thoughts.
Yeah.
And each thought could be 1 second, could be 10 minutes, could be longer.
Yes.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot.
Because if each of those
That's a lot of sexy time.
Yeah, that's a lot of sexy time. So when I look at this number, I'm like, well, there's no wonder this husband wants to have sex. He is thinking about it a lot. And that's not to compare it to say that's a lot for a man or low for a man or average. That's not the point of this podcast. It's just awareness.
This is an example of a man.
Yes.
And I don't know. I don't think that that's too far off, actually. I think that's, there's seasons for things too.
Yes. And this number, 64,512 times per year. Remember, that all started with the husband thinking about sex about once every 5 minutes.
Okay.
That's kind of how that starts.
So my number might be a lot higher than that.
Yes.
It could be.
It could be.
It could be lower. And I'm representing, other people.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's shift gears and move over to the wife's math. So when she had to fill out this questionnaire about how often she thinks about sex, I mean, it's not even any times per hour. The number is 0.
For this person.
For this person. Now,
that sucks.
So I want to stop for a second because this is the majority of my clients follow these numbers. They're not exact. They're very similar though. So I think that's important to keep in mind that these numbers are not meant to represent everybody, right? It's not meant to represent every wife. But this is the client that comes to me. It's usually they have these very similar numbers.
Now, these numbers aren't as important as the difference between the two, I think, is what we're going to get at.
It's the awareness. The
awareness of how much the man thinks about it compared to the woman.
Yes, and the thoughts that come afterwards.
Okay.
So 0 times per hour. 0. So in 1 day, this wife doesn't think about sex. And that's typical for her. She usually does not think about intimacy at all most days.
Until her husband has to remind her. And has to play some Jedi mind tricks to like, get her to think about it.
Yes,
okay.
he reminds her.
Yeah, he puts on his, like sexy cologne and maybe some like Speedos or something and like shakes it in front of her.
If he puts on the right cologne, she might not need, it might be good enough. Okay. She might start thinking about it a lot. Okay, so we're still at the number 0 per day. Now, where she started to have a number was when it came per week. And she said, I probably think about intimacy twice per week. And that was like pretty standard for her. 2 times a week. Now, that's not a lot of thinking. And she said she doesn't think about it for a long time when she is thinking about it.
So this isn't a woman who like reads romance novels or watches like The Bachelor,
She might watch The Bachelor.
I mean, I'm thinking about this from a man's perspective too, like the way that we might think about it.
Yeah.
But, I think about women who probably think about sex more or engaged in media that might have more sex in it. Yeah. Because those are just thoughts. That doesn't mean that she wants to have sex with her husband.
Right.
Those are just thoughts of romance or whatever.
Yeah.
But, okay, back to this example.
Okay, so we're at 2 times per week. Now, let's extend that out to the month. 8 times per month. Okay, so we can wrap our brains around that. So now let's multiply that for the whole year. So we have this wife is thinking about intimacy, or I should say sex, 96 times per year.
That seems so low and that's so depressing.
For her, it didn't seem depressing. It just seemed normal.
Just listening to these numbers, though, I'm like, wow, that's too bad. Is this client somebody who wants to think about it more?
She struggles because she doesn't think about it. So let's look at these 2 numbers side by side. We have the husband that is 64,512 times per year, and the wife 96 times per year.
Now, I think this is biased because she's the one giving you the information about her husband.
She asked her husband.
Oh, she asked? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. You did say that.
Yes.
And then as far as her thoughts go, maybe she is, I don't know, she's pushing some of those thoughts aside. Maybe she's having more than she thinks. And she's maybe biased against sex in general.
I don't know. She was here to get the help. So I think she was trying to be pretty real.
Okay.
So
it's probably not isolated to her. This is probably real for, like you say, your clients. Most of them are like this, and it probably goes beyond that. And I know, for you, I actually don't know what your number is.
Right.
Because you've asked me this question, and whenever we have this conversation, it's usually about my thoughts. So I'm feeling really selfish right now that I haven't dived into how many times you think about it.
Yeah, well, we can do that later.
Maybe we can get into this. Okay.
Okay, so now once we have this awareness of the difference in these 2 numbers, I try to help my clients really think about, hey, it's not that there's anything wrong with you, because my clients often feel like something's wrong with me. I'm broken because I don't feel a desire to be intimate. And I'm like, it's kind of math. There's some math involved. Your husband thinks about sex 64,000 times a year. You're thinking about it 96 times a year. It's a math problem, right? Yeah. Let's look at it a little bit differently. It's a math problem. He's thinking about it more. This is where thoughts become very important. He's thinking about it more. And if our thoughts trigger our emotions, he wants it more. His desire is higher because he is thinking thoughts of wanting to be intimate on a much higher frequency.
Which trigger feelings.
Yes.
That's what trigger action.
Yes. And that's why my clients are like, I don't feel the desire. I desire to desire, but I don't have it. They want that. And then when I try to say, well, how often are you thinking about intimacy? They're like, I don't. So it becomes very clear. And I love them to do the sexy math so that they can have an understanding of themselves.
Right.
I'm not thinking about intimacy That's why the desire is low. If I'm only thinking about intimacy twice a week, no wonder. And if my husband made me mad on the one occasion I was thinking about it, okay, then we can see what's happening, right? This is not going very well.
Now, one of the words you keep using, and you've corrected yourself a couple of times, is you said intimacy.
Yes.
And you said sex and then intimacy and kind of back and forth. But maybe you're going to get to this, I think.
Yes.
But this is one of the problems.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This is the difference.
Okay.
Usually after we do this math, I'll ask my clients, like, what do you think? What do you think about these numbers? And their thoughts are really negative towards their spouse. Usually is kind of like in this area. What a perv.
Yeah.
Get a grip. What an animal. Lustful. Sex beast. It's like, it's all very negative, kind of with names and titles.
And he's not really doing anything out of, the way he was created.
Correct.
And
Correct.
normal.
Very normal.
Right.
Now, the thoughts she has about herself is something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm broken. I'm abnormal. What's not working? It's very like self-oriented. I'm not good enough. I'm doing something wrong, or just something's inherently wrong with me. Now, that's not a fun feeling for them to be feeling. So it's very interesting, these two dynamics of thoughts, because if they're thinking, my husband's a perv, all he does is think about sex all day, they don't want to have sex with a perv.
Right.
It becomes very difficult for them to want to have sex with their husband, who they now think is a sex beast.
I wonder how many husbands don't even know that their wives think of them this way.
Correct.
And like, I'm assuming that, most people don't think of their husbands this way, but maybe most do at some point, right?
Clients that come to me do. And they feel bad about that.
Yeah, and that's sad, because the husband probably doesn't know. And the husband is probably like still trying to figure out like how to be romantic, and has figured some things out that work, but not really, because she's still thinking these things, even though she's, letting him in.
Yeah.
And being intimate or sexual with him at any given time whenever that happens, but she's probably not really one with him if she's thinking these things at the time.
It's a big challenge.
And he doesn't know that she's having a struggle with this, even though he probably knows that she may not, be into it as much as him. But he thinks that, if she's in the mood, then she likes it.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily the truth.
No, it's not necessarily the truth. Another question I usually ask my clients about intimacy when they are intimate is, when you're in the process of being intimate, are you actually thinking about intimacy? Are you present? A lot of times the women are like, no, I'm thinking about the things I need to do tomorrow, what's on my to-do list, things that didn't go right earlier in the day that I have to solve tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it becomes very obvious to them, which is very good, but it's also like a reality check that their thoughts or their lack of thoughts plays a big part of this. So just looking at the numbers, right, that's a lack of thoughts. And then some of the thoughts that they do have are really negative. So
let me stop you right there just for a second, because as you go through this, we're going to talk about this, but I'm going to share some things out of Tantra meditation. And one of the things that I just want to point out is that we have religious beliefs, very strong religious beliefs.
Yes.
And, a lot of people do. And if you're listening to this, hopefully all different, religious beliefs and spirituality, I hope you all listen. But I found that there is a lot more to the thoughts and how you can control those thoughts. And so I'm going to talk about meditation a little bit. But I also wanted to just point out that this coaching that we're doing we're trying to bring in all truth.
Yeah.
So as you're listening to this, I hope that you're not, just making judgments of, we're just trying to get everyone just to have sex. That's not the point. The point is to achieve a state of absolute awareness and being present with the other person, which I actually I've been studying about the state of ecstasy
Yeah.
recently, and ecstasy isn't physical, and it's beyond the physical, right? And it's beyond pleasure, it's beyond pain, it's beyond even thoughts, the thoughts that block us, right?
Right.
And so part of the thinking also is getting past the thoughts that block.
Yes, that's huge.
And so when we're talking about the highest level of oneness or unity between couples, the physical part is totally part of it. The pleasure part is part of it, but it's not the ultimate goal because it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
And so I just want to take a break so that if you're going to tune out, like, we're going to get to some of this. And I also want to remind you that we're trying to help people. So if you could subscribe to this, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe and hit that like button, not because we're trying to make any money off of this podcast, but that way it'll get to more people and more people will be able to hear what we have to say about it. If you think it's worthwhile, go ahead and do that. Thank you. Back to you.
So I really liked how you were talking about our awareness.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest goal with sexy math. It's not to actually like say, well, your numbers are so high, so you're this, and my numbers are low, and so I'm this. That's not the point. It is only for awareness to say, look, there is a difference. But as you look at the difference, when the husband is thinking about sex this much with his thoughts, he feels he wants to have sex that much. If a wife is not thinking about sex very often, she is not going to feel like she wants to have sex very often. And so I really try to help them make that connection for themselves. And I also hope that it really brings relief. Like, hey, if you do think about it more, these numbers are going to go up.
Well, yeah, they're going to even out. And I would say this even, because I've talked about this in our podcast before too. Then when we start talking about what intimacy is and what sex is, it's one part of intimacy.
Right.
And so the number of times I think about sex when our intimacy is high is actually lower. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not thinking just about sex. I'm thinking about all the other types of intimacy.
Yes.
And you're thinking about intimacy more too, and therefore you're going to be thinking about sex more because it's one of the types of intimacy.
Yes.
And as we become more and more one, we both are starting to kind of get equalized closer and closer. And I think that's where we become one, is when we can figure out how to be present for each other. And even though those sexual thoughts are still going to come to me more, they're going to come and go. They're going to be they're going to go right through my brain and out. And hopefully what I can learn to do by training how I think is to think more about intimacy in general and not just, hey, I want to get some and I just want to have sex and I just want to achieve orgasm and that's it.
Right. And I think this is such a good point, because what you're saying is the more that you work on your thoughts, you start to include more of the other types of intimacies. And I think for my clients, what they've experienced is that they think, I don't want to think about sex.
Right.
And so what we end up working on as a goal is, well, let's look at the whole spectrum of intimacy, because exactly what you said, that the physical sexual part of it is one part of it, but that doesn't mean that's the thing you have to think about. And I think for women, that really opens up what they can think about throughout the day without it just being the act of having sex. So if, like, for example, if a wife really loves romance, if that's a big turn on for her, she could challenge herself to think romantic thoughts more throughout the day.
Yeah.
That would really contribute to her feeling more romantic. And what would come with that is more thoughts of being intimate, which would fuel her natural desire to be intimate. And so it doesn't have to be like, oh, increase your numbers of how often you think about sex.
No.
Think about romance more. Think about kissing more.
Holding hands,
whatever makes you feel close to your husband. Think about those things more.
Hanging out together, going out to dinner, like
yes,
just being together, going to Costco.
Yes. Costco really did it for us.
last week.
Last week it did it for me. So so thoughts totally will trigger the natural emotion of desire within us.
Now, getting back to was it last podcast? You don't have to do anything.
Right.
Or was it the one before? I can't remember. But
it was the last one.
So last week we talked about you don't have to do anything. You know what? And I'm going to talk about this meditation a little bit, but part of this is not thinking about anything and being okay not thinking about anything. If you are having a lot of negative thoughts, right, the first step you might have to take, and this may be the best thing for you, is just to not think about it and not feel the pressure to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Think about things and train yourself to think about things you really like.
Yeah.
Right? You shouldn't feel forced, because if you feel forced, it's not going to be enjoyable even when you do think about it, and it's not going to lead to a wonderful experience of ecstasy.
Right. And if you enjoy romance, thinking about romance is not a chore.
Right.
It's easy to do that. You want to do that.
Right.
So I think that goes with what you're saying. Like, you don't have to pressure yourself. I don't ever pressure my clients to think about sex more if that's the part that's hard for them to think about. It's putting more of the good thoughts that they enjoy thinking back into their lives.
Now, I think this works for men too, because for me, I'll just speak for myself, but there are times for men, and I think some women, where you start thinking thoughts that are inappropriate, and you may fantasize about things that you shouldn't, and that starts to lead into, feelings that you shouldn't have, maybe even, pointing your sexual energy outside of your marriage to other people or fantasies or whatever. But as I have really focused on trying to control my thoughts, and for me, this ties right into spirituality too, and staying close to divinity and close to God and those things. But he wants me to think about intimacy with my wife.
Yeah.
But as I've gone down this path, this has helped me to not think about those things and not be as tempted to look at porn or watch, movies that I shouldn't watch and those kinds of things, right? Because a lot of men, some are better than others, right? But that's going to come into your life at some point, right?
Yes.
And if you're not focusing on these things, and if you're not trying to either get rid of the thoughts that you don't want to have, or actually exerting effort to have better thoughts, then it gives room for those other thoughts to come in, and then you're going to dwell on them more.
That's true.
So in some ways, it's like to reduce just the sexual appetite and increase the intimacy appetite.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're trying to get rid of the sex.
No.
Don't get me wrong. The sex gets way better if you're focusing on it and utilizing it in an efficient way, and you're really harnessing that energy and putting it in the right places.
Yes. Yeah. And that's so true. And I think my clients really can embrace the concept of intimacy and all the aspects of intimacy much easier than just sex. And I'm just here to meet my husband's sexual needs. That's really hard. That thought is usually a very predominant one and is hard for them, which obviously blocks their natural desire. But once you open it up to the whole spectrum of intimacy and anything that contributes to it, that changes their numbers.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. So that's all I have on this.
Okay.
So you can dive into yours.
Okay, so let me just talk about meditation a little bit. I think anyone who is familiar with prayer, and I think a lot of people who listen to our podcast probably do, and they probably pray often. Maybe they don't, and that's okay. But part of prayer is also listening, right? We can just talk to God all day. But if we're not listening and we're not letting the reality of the truth that surrounds us and that's already within us, that power that's already within us, if we don't let that flow in a way that's positive and listen to what, the universe has to say to us, or the Holy Ghost, or any kind of divinity, whatever it is that you believe in, I think it's all comes from the same place. If we're not taking time to do that, then we're not going to be able to learn how to control our thoughts as much. When I'm not taking that time and just really pondering and thinking about who I am and what I am and what my role in this world is and my relationship with you, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And when I'm like, oh, I'm going to say my prayers and I'm going to read my scriptures, and I just do that without taking a step back and really listening and pondering and letting my mind go to that place. And the thing about Tantra that's really awesome is there's chakras in our, I don't think that any of this contradicts anything that you will believe. I really don't. I think the world may take things like Kama Sutra and Tantra and these, things and they sexualize it.
Yeah.
And make it just about sex, but it really isn't.
Right.
It's about taking the connection we have with people, our wives, our family, our children, even, and really helping us become more and more aware. So this book's called The Power of Tantra Meditation, and it's 50 meditations for energy, awareness, and connection. And I'm not going to get into like the history of Tantra and tantric practice, but you should do some research. It's something that I'm far from a master at. I'm not a guru or anything like that, but I found that there's a lot of exercises that help the connection in an intimate relationship. There's no question about it. But it's not just that. It's also the relationship we have with ourselves.
Yes.
And, the title of this podcast is Restore Yourself First, Restore Your Marriage. And I encourage you to go to our website. It's andersoncoaching.com. And Shelly has started releasing her courses, and her first course is called Restore Yourself.
Yes.
Now, she doesn't get into Tantra specifically, but a lot of the things that she talks about is fully related to this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to talk about this meditation, and I encourage you to do it. Okay, and I'm going to close with this. But if we want to get to a place, the sacred state, where we are one with the divine and with our spouse and with ourselves, then we need to take time to let the things that we're learning and experiencing and feeling, let those things work for our good. And a lot of times the reason why we can't move forward is because our thoughts are totally in the way. And that's what Shelly teaches. 100% she focuses on the self-coaching model, and that's very much what I'm going to talk about. But this is a specific meditation, okay? I'm just going to read this. I'm going to have the book here so you can look it up. This is a great book. There is far more to the human being than the physical body. In this meditation, you will expand the heart through the simple combination of breath and focused attention. And this meditation is called Expanding Heart Meditation. In this expansive state, the heart is open and becomes the space from which you can move, act, and relate in the world. Through consistent practice, this meditation can bring you to the non-dual recognition that the heart is the space within which all life unfolds, right? And you can interpret this however you want to. But I think we believe that the heart and the I am, right? The Tantra thinks about it as the third eye, right? This is the I am. This is where we exist, is here. And I think all of us, if you close your eyes and you think about where we exist, where am I? Am I in my toes? Am I in my fingers? Well, I can feel them, but I exist here. And then I can also feel, this whole area just becomes this place where I experience life. And now we're talking about trying to transcend pain, right? And the pleasure at this point. We're not talking about that right now. Okay, so number one, this meditation can be done in a traditional posture. Right? You can sit in a chair, you can sit Indian style, or crisscross applesauce, whatever they call it nowadays, right? I still call it Indian style. Sorry. But however, if you have difficulty relaxing your body or connecting with your breath, you may find it more beneficial to do this practice while lying down. So whatever's comfortable, get in a comfortable place, right? Place where you don't have to have like strain on your body, okay? Whatever that is. Close your eyes and take a moment to connect with your breath, right? So we always hear about breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, but connect with that. Just breathe comfortably. Allow it to become longer and deeper with each inhalation and exhalation. Notice your breath. Now this is where it becomes part of the heart. Notice your breath running over your heart, right? In and out. And you can feel your breath when you do this. And you close your eyes and you really focus on it. And it's quiet. You can feel this. You connect with the heart, and with each exhalation, you shine it out into the world, right? So think about it as energy, and you're letting it go out into the world, whatever that is. Maybe it's negativity at that point. Maybe it's positivity. But just whatever you're feeling, let it run over your heart. It's like almost like what happens to Jacob in Twilight when he like bonds with Bella and
Imprinting.
Imprinting.
Oh,
it's
the
kinda,
other girl, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the imprinting, right? You're imprinting where you are at that moment, and you're just accepting that. And after that, as you inhale, keep connecting with the center of your chest. As you exhale, feel the heart expanding further and further out into the world. At first, this expansion may be in the vicinity of your physical body. However, as it continues, it will grow into the room, your home, your whole country, the world, and even into the universe or beyond. Okay? Like, just imagine that. And this is not going to make sense when you first do it. And your mind's going to wander. And you're going to start thinking about all kinds of things. But stay focused on your breath and focus on it running over your heart, in and out into the world. Okay, so take some time to really establish the heart in this expansive state. So be patient. And when you are ready, bring your attention back to your body. Okay, wiggle your toes, feel the sense of your physical body on the floor, if you're laying down, or your feet, where you're sitting. Open your eyes and acknowledge that world around you. Now, this is not an exercise where you're going to start discovering all kinds of things right away. This is simply a meditation. It's a very simple meditation where you can kind of get level with yourself. Okay. And at that point, take a moment, recognize your awareness and your presence in that moment with yourself. Now, you may think about all kinds of things. Whatever comes to your mind, if it's negative, let it pass. Let it just go. And that's going to take some practice. If it's positive, stick with it. But this is one of those exercises where you can start to become aware of how you feel and how you want to feel, right? A lot of times we think we feel good when we don't. And so doing meditation helps us to just become one with ourselves and start to be able to connect with the world around us. And so this might sound a little hippy-dippy to some of you, but I absolutely believe in meditation, and actual exercises can really help you. And so another name for this is mindfulness, right? These are truths that I think that a lot of us miss when we just go to Sunday school and just think everything's just going to be okay if I do this, this, and this. Okay, but there's things that are real about us that I think if we can connect with ourselves and then start connecting with someone else and really start to think about them in their true sense and their true light, then we'll start to see them differently. We start to see ourselves differently. We start to act differently. That's what changes people, right? When we change ourselves. So I just wanted to leave you with that little exercise. However you want to meditate, you don't have to do this. Just take some time. If you don't want to do this exercise, and if you don't like the word tantra, or you don't like things that come from other parts of the world, right? Well, that's up to you. But there's a lot of truth out there. And at a minimum, if you'll just take some time and just breathe and just try to let your mind focus on what's happening right here, and not the thoughts about what you need to get done, and not the thoughts about what you wish you didn't do. Like, try not to feel any regret in that moment. Just connect with yourself. And after you're done with that, you will have a much clearer path forward to be more helpful to those that you love. So I'm just going to leave it there.
Awesome. Well, I love that, because I think sometimes we can just forget the beauty of doing a simple meditation. And I think it's so related. I love that it was related to the heart and how we feel. And I think a lot of times when I get a client, they're usually feeling pretty crummy. They're not feeling good about themselves. They're not feeling good about their spouse. They're not feeling good about intimacy or their marriage.
Yeah.
And so being able to tie all these together and say, hey, your thoughts matter. They make a big difference. And being able to slow yourself down, do a little bit of meditating, get back to yourself. I think those are all very connected and all very important. Mm-hmm. So, well, we hope that you guys will be able to think about these concepts throughout this next week and put some of this good stuff back into your life if you feel like it's maybe been missing a little bit. And just remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy with yourself, the more you can restore it with your spouse.
Yes. Amen.
Yes. Thank you
Love
so
it.
much for listening today, and we hope you will join us again next week.